Welcome back to ROL Radio. Today we have newly promoted black belt under Jungle MMA's Mike Lee and Thiago Domingues, Josh Shilney. Josh grew up on the south side of Chicago and had a lot of obstacles and challenges as a teenager. After being roughed up and robbed, his stepfather took him to meet a local BJJ practitioner, and Josh fell in love with the sport. Josh has had some fantastic BJJ mentors throughout his jiu-jitsu journey, and he believes without those father figures, his life would have turned out much differently. So how has it turned out? Josh now has his black belt, along with degrees in philosophy, criminology, and now a law degree. Let's take a listen to a very cerebral episode of ROL Radio with Josh Shilney.
Welcome to ROL Radio.
And we are live. Gary, how are you?
I am great. Having a great day so far today, and I'm looking forward to today's podcast. Even though I feel I'm a little outnumbered, we've got two Southsiders, and I'm a Northside Chicagoan. So we'll see how this goes for me. I'm glad we're not all in the same spot. I won't get beat up today.
Hey, listen, but what's cool about today is we have Josh in the house, and you know, I think a lot of people out there, especially the ones who are starting this journey of jiu-jitsu, always wonder what it takes to become a black belt and what's the feeling about being black belt, and that's what we're going to talk to Josh about today, because recently he was awarded a black belt, and that's just a huge achievement. So Josh, welcome to the show, and congratulations. On the black belts.
Tom, Gary, very nice to see you both. It's been a while. Can't wait to see you guys in person, hopefully soon, but we'll definitely make it happen once everything opens up.
Yeah, I hope so. I think we saw you over the holidays at the end of last year, right? Stopped in for some.
Came in to visit for Christmas when I went to go visit my parents in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, we can't wait to have you back.
Yeah. So you started your journey in Chicago, and we kind of already know the story, but I want you to share that story from the beginning, if you don't mind. What got you in jiu-jitsu? Everybody has their own story, and you know, just like myself and Gary and millions out there, yours is really interesting. So, what got you in?
Yeah, so I started jiu-jitsu in about 2009, 2010. I had wrestled for about a year my freshman year of high school. I was no good. I was absolutely terrible. I think I went like 4-8. I got a fractured cheekbone. Just wasn't a great time. And I transferred schools a lot. So when I transferred schools, the new school didn't have a wrestling team. So I had to kind of uproot and try to find something to do with my time. Around that same time, the school was Marine Math and Science Academy on the west side of Chicago. Wasn't in the greatest of areas, but I was jumped. So on my way to a McDonald's, don't eat McDonald's anymore, but on the way to a McDonald's, I got followed by a group of about 4 kids. They went to Crane Communications High School, and they cornered me, slapped me around a little bit, ran through my pockets, took an iPod and like $10. So came home with 2 black eyes, and I was like, man, this really sucks. And at the time, my mom's now ex-husband was like, oh, hey, like I have a friend that's a purple belt that trains jiu-jitsu. This is kind of something that you'd probably like. It has a little bit to do with wrestling. It's grappling. Like, let's just try it out. Let's see if you like it. And so I was fortunate enough to have the Chicago Boxing Club right by where I grew up as a kid on 35th and Halsted. And at the time, they were just starting an MMA program. They had Andre Mediz. He is now a 3-stripe black belt at Carlson Gracie HQ in Chicago. He was a brown belt at the time, and he was just kind of teaching like this no-gi class that threw a little bit of striking in, but it wasn't anything super complex. It was like basic closed guard stuff, hit a Kimura every now and then, that kind of thing. And so with training with Andre, he eventually encouraged me to go ahead and jump into a Naga. Went to a Naga, placed fairly well, did decent. And my parents were like, wow, this is something that we actually see you growing with. Like, do you want to continue doing this? And I was like, yeah, of course. Like, let's try it. And at the time, I mean, I grew up with a single mom, and she was a teenager when she had me. So like money was a little scarce every now and then. And the financial commitment to kind of going into a formal jiu-jitsu school with the gis and like being on a contract and all of that it weighed a lot. So my mom was really driving home, like, if you want to start this is something that you have to finish. And so that kind of drove me all the way through till today. Like, that was one of the things that I talked about when I got my black belt. Like, I broke down and cried because I just remember my mom telling me, like, this is something that you have to finish. And I've kind of accomplished that goal for not only me, but for her too.
That's amazing. I mean, that's really a really cool kind of how everything came together from the very beginning to the end, even though the beginning wasn't so unfortunate, right? But talk about a little bit more about that day when all these things unfolded. So did you have any experience prior to that event as far as fighting, defending yourself, anything?
Yeah, fighting. So growing up in the southside Chicago, Irish Catholic neighborhood, we were rival. I grew up in Bridgeport. So we were rivals with the kids in Canaryville. And pretty much from the second that I was old enough to kind of go to the park by myself, you'd end up getting into some tussles with the kids in the neighborhood just here and there. I was always a loser. So before I wrestled, I was a fat kid. I was like 165, 170 pounds at like the age of 13 or 14. And I had zero athletic ability, got made fun of all the time. I was bullied a lot. So there was a couple of times where I would just have to just go out and defend myself. And whether that would be just closing my eyes and swinging or just like trying to shoot a double leg and hoping for the best, it just necessarily didn't always work out. So the day that I had gotten jumped, I had gotten out of school a little bit early. I had a free period at the last period of my sophomore year. I think it was the beginning of my sophomore year, actually. And I was like walking with a couple of friends. My friends like sped up and they went into McDonald's beforehand. I think I was on the phone or something. And I looked over my shoulder and noticed there was a group of kids following me. So as they were following me, I kept looking over my shoulder, and they keep taunting me. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to get into this McDonald's and I'll be totally fine. Like, they're not going to do anything in public. And so, you know how like there is like the umbrella room when you're up north, like it's the spot where like you kick off your boots and everything before you walk into a restaurant. So there's the two doors, one opens this way, one opens that way. I get cornered in between both of the doors and they're like, run down your pockets. And so I was in military school at the time. So I was wearing like a camo uniform that had like the big side pockets, the cargo pockets on the side. And they started patting me down. They realized that I had my wallet. So they take my wallet. I tried to take my wallet back. Didn't work too well. I got hit right in the face right away. And it was one of those things where like your adrenaline spikes and then it dumps right away, especially because I was like out of shape, didn't have any idea of how to control my adrenaline or anything at the time. And I just kind of balled up on the floor, getting hit a couple of times, and they just ran through my pockets. I think iPod shuffle maybe, and like 10 or 15 bucks. And they threw my wallet back at me, and I never really saw them again after that.
What do you think would happen if that event didn't take place?
If that didn't take place, I probably would not have gotten as hardcore into martial arts. I had already had about 2 years of formal karate training that I had kind of just quit doing just because I didn't find doing kata fun. I really wanted to continue wrestling, but obviously my school didn't have a wrestling program. So honestly, I probably would not have had as many of the positive things that have come with jiu-jitsu from that. I definitely probably would still be kind of like a couch potato, playing video games all the time, eating as much junk food as I possibly could. But yeah, that's kind of, I don't think that my life would have had as many positive things as it has had now.
Isn't it interesting how one moment in our life could literally change the direction of our entire future? And they say, jiu-jitsu changes lives, and it's, some people don't believe it and some people are really, really behind it. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, man, so when I was applying to law school and then even when I was applying to college, I wrote my essays on how it's extremely cliche, but jiu-jitsu did save my life. And it saved my life because it afforded me these opportunities that I was never going to have, or there were opportunities that I wouldn't have had for a long time. It was a very good avenue to kind of skirt me in the right direction. Growing up, my mom's now ex-husband, I had three stepbrothers. I was the youngest, I was the smallest, and they were definitely a little bit more hood mentality than I was growing up. So they got into the gang life. They did every bad thing that they could under the sun, got arrested at a young age, things like that. And that very well could have been me if I didn't have the positive influences on the mat to say, hey, this is a good place to spend your time after school. You can come here, you can do your homework before class, You can stay with us until 9 o'clock at night. You just take the train home. I even ended up having people that live fairly close to me. So they'd be Joe Negron. He would, one of the resident black belts, he would actually drive me home every now and then because we ended up living a couple of blocks away from each other. And so, jiu-jitsu was really the first time I was like growing up in the Irish Catholic neighborhood that I grew up in. It was very working class to middle class kind of mentality. Not too many people around me had college degrees. And the first time I stepped onto the mat, I was training with lawyers. I was training with doctors. I was training with these higher up professionals that really started to push me into the right direction. Like, hey, maybe you should pursue higher education. Maybe you should kind of sit here and like, I'll help you with your homework to make sure that you can get it done so that you can be in the same situation that I am in at this point in my life.
Are you saying that because you got into jiu-jitsu, the opportunity of higher education present itself and you kind of went down the route? I mean, you mentioned you finished a law school. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment on its own. Do you think that, are you saying that this is all partially because you got involved in jiu-jitsu and you met all these people and these opportunities that were essentially in front of you?
100%. So I distinctly remember Brian Jacobson. I don't know if he trains anymore. He was a high-level blue belt, low-level purple belt maybe last time I saw him, which was probably around 2011, 2012. And I remember him sitting me down and just kind of explaining what college was like. And I was like, wow, that sounds like an environment that I would really grow in. And so from there on out, I was like, guys, help me fill out my college applications. Like, what do I have to do to make sure that I can go to these schools? Because at the time, like, I definitely couldn't have afforded to go to college. The second that I started jiu-jitsu, my grades, I went from being like a C- student to an A+ student.
But
it
why?
Just put me,
Why?
one, the discipline, obviously. And then two, I had to really learn how to manage my time to actually get my work done because I wanted to train like 3 hours a day. And in order to do that, I had to show up early from jiu-jitsu. I get out of school at 3 o'clock. Jiu-jitsu doesn't start till 5. So Beto Barros used to let me come in, sit behind the front desk and just do my homework up until class would start. And there was definitely times where he would be like, oh, your homework's not done. You're not training until it's done. So I was like, okay, well, I guess that's what I'm going to do. And then it just stuck with me and I learned how to manage my time. I learned discipline. My mom was very much, if you keep your grades up, you can keep doing jiu-jitsu. And I was like, man, this is awesome for sure. Definitely no problem. I will do my homework now.
Yeah, I think it does that. I'm sorry. I think it does that for adults too, right? You learn how to manage your time. You learn what's important, priorities. We always talk about priorities here. So I think that's great that and there's a lot to say about mentorship too, right? And you're dropping all these names of people that took this kid under their wing and really changed his life. It's truly impressive.
Oh, this past Father's Day, obviously I didn't grow up with a dad. And so this past Father's Day, like I wrote a post on Instagram about how, when I was younger, I used to hate this day just because I didn't have like that fatherly bond. But the older that I've gotten, the more I've realized that the people that I've met on the mat have kind of given me like that mentorship that I needed to help me become the man that I am today. So I gave a shout out to Mike Lee from the Jungle MMA down in Orlando. Thiago Domingues, the daily Hiva black belt, took me under his wing. Joey Best, Chris Reed. Just there's so many guys that have helped me and guided me along my journey so far that 100% they're like a dad. Like on and off the mat, like business advice about school, advice about life, advice about like dealing with troubles at home, just anything. They were just always there for me. And to me, like that is so much worth all the blood, sweat, and tears of doing jiu-jitsu just to have those relationships with those people that have helped me get to this point in my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you mentioned all these different names and different people that made that impact on you and throughout this entire journey, right? What do you think was the pinnacle point during this entire process? And I'm not talking about the beginning or the end, but were there any points throughout this whole thing where you're like, wow, there was an epiphany. This is really why I'm doing this.
Man,
I'm putting you on a spot here.
You are. I really think that it kind of came down to when I realized very early on that this was just like jiu-jitsu was just like a way for me to center myself. And I was probably around a blue belt, maybe higher level blue belt, right before I moved down to Florida. And I was just like, this is something that makes me stand out from the crowd. Obviously, I'd put it on all of my college applications. And it's something that very few people were able to say that they have accomplished. And I was like, this is just something that I need to stick with, because this is where I feel the most whole as a person.
And you mentioned, again, several names that impacted you throughout the life. I think you're one of those individuals who had the opportunity to train jiu-jitsu with several different people, right? And I want you to really tell that story here, because there's in jiu-jitsu community that there is this kind of a divide, right? You should train only with one place and you cannot talk to anybody else, which, it is what it is, but there is that. And there's the other one, kind of a new age approach where, train with everybody, train as much as you can, cross train and get to know people in that larger community, right? And we not necessarily want to talk about who's right, who's wrong, but I know that you had the opportunity to train with many, not just few, but many. How do you think that impacted your life? From a variety perspective and different mentors that you had throughout the life?
For sure. So, like, besides just the impact on my jujitsu, because I can kind of go back and trace my lineage, and I can tell you where certain parts of my game as a whole, which school those came from. So I just kind of like took a whole bunch of puzzle pieces and put them together. I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question one more time?
That was a long one.
I talk too much.
Yeah. What did you gain? I think here I'll take. Yeah. What did you gain from training in all these different environments? How many academies have you gone to over the years?
At least 10.
10, yeah. And you've picked up from multiple people out of 10 academies, all these different things. And what do you think that has made you as a person, or just as a black belt?
I think it's made me incredibly open-minded to learning new things. Obviously, jiu-jitsu does that as a whole to begin with, but I was so used to kind of having these random new structures constantly thrown at me, and I had to constantly adapt to like the way that classes were run at X, Y, and Z Academy versus like the academy that I was at before. So it kind of just gave me the opportunity to really use jiu-jitsu as a form of self-expression mostly than anything, just because I did realize that I was learning chunks from each individual.
Yeah. Hey, that kind of goes back though to the way you grew up, I think, at least, right? With not having a dad. I'm not on board with that. That's really the wrong thing to say, right? But I grew up without a father in the house as well. But then you said, stepdads, stepbrothers, changing schools, right? So your early life mirrors in a way your adult life, but it's kind of the opposite, right? Because it's much more successful. It's much more of a positive aspect in your life rather than the troubles that you had early on, right?
For sure. I'm kind of big on the mentality of taking the negatives and turning them into something positive, and moving around a lot and kind of having that constant change as a kid, I feel like has really helped me up until this point, even in kind of like my professional development, because it's just given me that adaptability and the willingness to jump into a new situation, because I was always in a new situation. There was never a time where I actually was on like that even keel where I could sit here and get comfortable. It was always sit here, learn something new. Okay, time to move on. That kind of thing. And it wasn't always in my control of something that I could do.
And what's
it was kind of like
interesting
a
to
forced
me,
learning.
yeah, and what's interesting to me right now, what you mentioned just a second ago, is one, not getting comfortable in situations and constant adaptation to new things. Things are out of my control. I need to turn this negative into positive, and these are kind of big points of jiu-jitsu itself, isn't it? I mean, we have our plan always, right? I want to pass the guard, I want to defend it, whatever the case is, but we can't control the opposite side. They have their own plan, and I'm yet to meet a person who would align with my plan. They never do, right? And so it kind of is interesting how your life follows the same principles as jiu-jitsu, and this whole concept of continuous troubleshooting, continuously adapting to the current situation, and oftentimes that situation is not necessarily what we want it to be. We have to evolve, if you will, and be very agile of what's happening.
For sure. For sure.
Does that so you got a degree in philosophy as well? And
I do. I have. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, what Thomas just talked about, that philosophy of jiu-jitsu, how does that go with your major or your degree, I'm sorry, in philosophy? Are they similar? Are they opposing? Can you fit one into the other? That type of stuff?
So when I majored in philosophy, I kind of more so focused on the philosophy of government. It was almost like a poli-sci degree without actually being poli-sci. But definitely, I'm a big fan of like the Stoics. If you look at my Instagram account, like usually I have a Stoic quote that goes along with kind of anything that I do that has to do with jiu-jitsu. I'm a really big Seneca fan, but that's kind of where I draw the line. I actually had a unique experience about a year ago where I got invited back to my undergrad. One of my philosophy professors was teaching a philosophy martial arts class, and I got to go in and I got to actually just talk about jiu-jitsu. And it was really cool to see a bunch of lay people that have no idea what jiu-jitsu is kind of being like, oh, that makes total sense. They were relating it back to a whole bunch of Asian philosophy that I just never really had the interest in. But it definitely has helped me with philosophy, just like jiu-jitsu. You have to constantly have an open mind. You have to constantly ask questions. And it's always about trying to make like incremental improvements based on something else. So like if I'm trying to write a philosophy PhD paper, I'm going to take something that was written in like the 18th century. I'm just going to add little bits onto it to try to defeat smaller arguments that are within it. It's very much like jiu-jitsu. Like I start with closed guard and I eventually build like a full system within my closed guard.
Nice. I feel smarter today.
We thought that was not possible.
Right. Yeah. And look, here we are.
Why law school? Why philosophy? Where did this come from?
So I went to undergrad with the thoughts of being biomedical pre-med. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be House from the TV show. And I learned very quickly after about a full year that curving tests were only a thing that really happened in movies. And so by the time I got to organic chemistry, I was like, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. I was taking a biomedical ethics class and I was like, oh, this is incredibly interesting. And at the same time, I had recently lost my grandfather, who was like my main father figure throughout my life. And I had completely uprooted myself because I wanted to get away from all the negativity that I've had in Chicago. I uprooted myself and moved down to Tampa by myself. So first time alone, 1,000 miles away from home. And I just had questions on kind of who I was and what my place was in the world. And I felt like philosophy kind of gave me the opportunity to sit there and dive in deep to questions and kind of like find out which worldviews I need to be able to help lift myself up and to continue advancing on. So I ended up double majoring in criminology and philosophy. Basically, it just means that I understand how people work a little bit. Almost, they're both very interdisciplinary. So you do sociology, psychology, economics, it's all kind of intertwined into one when you put both the majors together. And I was kind of like, okay, well, what can I do for a living now with these 2 degrees? Because I'm a very big advocate of going to college to kind of find out more about yourself and less about learning a skill that's applicable to the real world. At least that's what happened to me. I used it as kind of 4 years of self-discovery while gaining some random knowledge that like might help me on a trivia night, but it's not really always necessarily applicable to the real world. And so I was like, okay, well, I can either go and pursue like a philosophy PhD and I can just teach other people how to do philosophy. I can go and work in maybe like an HR department, or I can go to law school and just try my crack at it. I had a 3.8 in undergrad, so I had fairly high GPA. School was just always, once I started jiu-jitsu, school just was easy for me. I kind of just skated through everything. And so I didn't know really what to do with my life. I had worked at a couple of law firms already. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to give a crack at law school. Looking back, I immediately regretted that decision. I did not enjoy law school at all.
Why not?
It was one of the most boring things that I've ever had to do in my life.
I think you just pissed off a lot of lawyers out there.
Probably. I wouldn't doubt it.
Good.
the argumentation is fun. Just the law school process as a whole, I was just like, man, this is just so not related to the actual practice of law. Because I went into law school with already about 3 years of law firm experience working with a bigger firm, and I was like, this is just nothing like what it's like in the real world in law. So I went there. I had not so great of a time in law school. I had a lot of personal struggles that came up that were out of my control. My youngest stepbrother passed away my first year. Immediately after that, my second year, my oldest stepbrother passed away. And my middle stepbrother is currently serving 25 years to life in prison. So all of those things kind of added up. And I eventually started just brushing school off and kind of fell into a funk where I just wasn't doing my work like I should have. I didn't stay diligent enough. There was just too many outside factors that were kind of like pulling me away. Meanwhile, this whole time I'm still training, and I'm very much, when I am down and out, I pour more of myself into jiu-jitsu to lift me up than I do kind of focusing on other aspects of my life, which probably in a way it's a therapy, but at the same time, it's kind of, I've used it too much as a crutch throughout my life. But at the same time, I'm pretty decent at jiu-jitsu because of it, so I'm not really that mad.
I think you're better than decent. Like I roll with you. Okay, let's just put it out there.
But yeah, so right now I'm actually, so I graduated in May, but I'm finishing my last 3 credits. Part of when my oldest stepbrother passed away, I had to drop out of a class. I couldn't handle it, and then my parents got a divorce. So I couldn't hang with my course load that I had. So I dropped out of a class during an ad drop period, tried to get into an easier class. They wouldn't let me do it. So I'm now taking a summer class. My last 3 credits, I'm pretty much guaranteed to pass it. So I'm just kind of chugging on through there, and I won't be able to take the bar exam until February. So right now I'm kind of just applying to random in and out jobs just to try to get some real world experience before I either go out and practice law or kind of try to tackle the corporate world.
I got to ask you, Josh, I'm listening to your story, and I find dozens of reasons why you should quit all of this and give up. I mean, one after the other, family obstacles and your personal life and you changing, going to school, you not liking it. And I mean, it's just one after the other. And I'm not even mentioning your childhood where all these other things were happening. Why in the world are you so stubborn? What drives you forward?
I don't like to quit. I find it extremely motivating when people tell me I can't do something. So it just kind of makes me hunker down and just charge forward. Like once everything started happening with law school, I was like, okay, I'm already in this disgusting amount of debt. What am I going to do from here on out? And I was like, I want to finish. I want to have the paperwork to say that I actually did it. I'm not going to let these bumps in my life stop me from doing something that I had planned. If I want to relate this back to philosophy, one of my mentors in philosophy, his name's Marcus Arvin. He was taught underneath Daniel Dennett, who's in philosophy, they call him one of the 4 horsemen. But he wrote this book, and the book's premise is basically you have to use your current self to set up your future self to be prosperous. And so I kind of took that to heart right away. And so if I plan on doing something, I'm not going to let a roadblock stop me from hitting that later on. I want 20-year-old Josh to be able to be 25-year-old Josh to be satisfied with the decisions that 20-year-old Josh made. And so when I look back, 15-year-old Josh wrote down on his intro paperwork that I wanted to be a black belt, and my mom wanted me to be a black belt. So I went out and I got my black belt. I'm still learning, but I got my black belt. 22-year-old Josh said, I'm going out and I'm getting a law degree. 26-year-old Josh is about 3 weeks away from getting that. So it's just, I'm trying to make my future self proud of my current self. And that's kind of like the guiding force of my life.
Yeah, I think a lot of people out there could take advice from you, or at least follow the footsteps, and it's some small percentage, because everything that I'm hearing, Gary, what do you think? I mean, this is some of these things that I'm hearing is like a story, essentially.
Yeah.
Like
well, I think 49-year-old Gary's got a lot to learn from 26-year-old Josh.
This is not where I was going with this, but
well, Yes, that always happens here. I think that, too often people look back and they are disappointed or regret the decisions they made. Um, and, uh, and then they make excuses, right? Because they just weren't planning. And it sounds like you've got a plan, just writing it down. What do we tell people here in class, and the kids especially, about goals, right? Write it down. And I think when you write
100%.
it down and then you look back at it, you're going to be able to remind yourself to keep going, right? If you don't write it down and you hit those bumps in the road, it's probably a lot easier just to say, well, you know what? I never really wanted it. But if it's written down, you must have, right? And you must have given it some time and some effort and some thought. So I think that the planning things out like that really is something that can help a lot of people. And hopefully today people will be hearing that and picking up on it. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Earlier this week when we were, Gary and I, we were kind of preparing for this conversation, Gary shared something that I had no idea, and I want to touch on this. I'm going to steal this from Gary. Gary wanted to ask you this, but I don't want to forget about this. So
Hold on. I do not come up with much that's good. So don't steal.
I heard a rumor that you got more than 4 stripes on your purple belt.
Yeah.
What in the world is this going on here? Talk about this, man. That's a funny story.
So I had 6 stripes on my purple belt.
I want 6 stripes on my purple belt.
So when I had moved to Florida, I trained at like 3 different schools right off the bat within like my first year of being here. I stopped going because I either didn't have a mode of transportation, like living in Chicago. I didn't know how to drive yet at the age of 19, just because like I could take CTA within a block of anywhere that I needed to go. So I didn't have a car, and then I couldn't afford gym fees. So it was like, okay, what the hell am I going to do? I eventually saved up enough money, bought my mom's old car off her, shipped it down to Florida, and I started training at Ybor City Jiu Jitsu Club under Joey Best. He's a Nick Rodriguez black belt, the epitome of like a mat hippie. He just loves Jiu Jitsu and just wants to make Jiu Jitsu just applicable for everyone and wants everyone to have access to it. I think to this day, he doesn't charge more than like $80 a month, just because he wants to make sure that everybody can get a taste of Jiu Jitsu and have the positives that Jiu Jitsu comes with. But I was actually their 8th purple belt from there. So that's where I earned my purple belt. And their philosophy behind promotions is that we don't really do stripes beyond white belt, because their white belt kind of is about 1.5 to 2 years to get your blue belt. And then after that, you're so invested that it shouldn't take a piece of tape to kind of keep you going and kind of keep that motivation up. And so I had trained there. Got my purple belt, and I think about 2015, beginning to end of 2015. And when I decided to go to law school, I had to move away from Tampa and leave Ybor. And I was supposed to get my brown belt before I left. They had told me about it and everything, and something came up with moving, and I just wasn't able to show up for my brown belt. Excuse me. So when I moved to Orlando, I started training at Bruno Malfacini's Brad Thompson's school. It's an alliance school. Excuse me. And I had worked like on and off, just trying to make sure my dues were met. And I eventually I don't vibe with like the hardcore competition mentality schools. It's just not my thing. Like, I'm too much laissez-faire. I'm just here to like learn and use jiu-jitsu as a form of expression. I could care less about being a world champion at this point. So I switched schools back to a Gracie Baja. I had met a couple of guys within the competition scene that were also purple belts. They were my size, and our schedules matched up perfectly, where we could train with each other dependably like 6 days out of the week. So through training there, I'd already had my purple belt for maybe about 2.5 years, but I didn't have any stripes on my belt. So with going to the Gracie Baja classes, I eventually started getting stripes, and I got 2 stripes from Gustavo Mugiati. And then I was getting these super fight offers for no-gi, and I kept on getting caught in heel hooks. And I didn't have people that were consistently willing to kind of drill heel hooks and use heel hooks live. And I was like, okay, I need to switch it up a little bit. So I switched over to the Jungle MMA. But before I went over to the Jungle MMA, I was already driving back. Ybor City has this amazing open mat on Sundays. If anyone is ever in the Tampa Bay area or in Central Florida, it's more than worth the drive. It's a 3-hour-long open mat. like no time limit, submission only. You get all of like the high level competitors from Central Florida that all come to one place, and they just roll hard. At any given time on a Sunday, there's at least 8 to 10 black belts from various different schools, and just everybody just is there to train and just have a good time. So I was there was like a 3-week gap between training at Orlando BJJ or I'm sorry, not Orlando BJJ, Gracie Baja Orlando and the Jungle MMA. And so when I had gone back for an open mat, I actually went back for Chris Reed's black belt ceremony. And so while I was there, at the end, after Chris got his black belt, Joey actually came up to me, the owner of the school, and was like, hey, I had taken the stripes off my belt at that time, the 2 stripes that I got from Orlando BJJ, because I was like, they're just pieces of tape and they were coming off anyways, whatever. I just took them off. And Joey was like, hey, I know that you've already visited the Jungle MMA. You went there as a purple belt. He was like, you've been a purple belt for way too long. Here's 4 stripes. And so that is how I got 4 stripes from Joey, and I got 2 stripes from Gracie Baja Orlando. So nice. I was a 6-stripe purple belt, and
that's great. I've seen double promotions. I've seen people get 2 at one time, but never 4. That's new to me.
I know a guy that was a brown belt for like 5 or 6 years, just because he didn't feel like he was ready for his black belt yet, and so he was notorious for like they had like the old school card system for taking like nail polish remover and taking the dots off his cards so that he wouldn't get promoted. And so he got probably about 8 stripes on his brown belt before he finally accepted a black belt when it was offered to him.
Lord.
That's hilarious.
Everyone has their own journey, man. Right. You just have to embrace it.
I think that's the beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu. You know, it's there's not necessarily right or wrong. It's your own. And so often I think that part of philosophy, jiu-jitsu philosophy, is missed. I think there's nothing wrong with chasing belts or chasing gold medals. There's nothing wrong with it, but often there is that, you know, hyper focus on one thing, and it takes away that enjoyment of the journey itself. It's how much more, you know, we could improve, you know, in jiu-jitsu on the mat, and then in our lives, if we kind of took that pressure away from each other, you know, not focus on these things that maybe won't matter in 10 years. I mean, what do you think about that?
I would 100% agree with you on that, actually. I have never really been hardcore belt motivated. I was just happy just to be on the mat most of the time. If I could find consistent training partners, I was the happiest I could possibly be. The belt thing really didn't start to matter to me until I started teaching. And it was only because I was getting people that were coming in off the street, and they see me not as a black belt teaching a class or teaching private lessons, and they're sitting there second guessing everything that's coming out of my mouth. And then I'd be like, okay, well, why don't you just put a gi on and come spar with me? And you'll see that like I'm actually being legitimate and I'm not just making this stuff up. Like I'm not.
Did they ever accept that offer?
Oh yeah. I had a couple of guys down in Florida where it was like, okay, you want to keep questioning everything that I'm doing, asking really dumb questions, saying that it's not going to work on you, then let's go ahead. Let's go and roll. I'm super friendly when I roll. I'm very flowy. I don't do like the whole bullying thing on the mat, but like I'm definitely going to put you in positions where you're going to feel compromised. And that's just what I had to do. And then by the end of it, after like a week or two, it also comes into a factor that I'm very young when I started teaching. So people were very much like, you'd get like a 35-year-old guy that's like, hey, what's this 22-year-old doing teaching a class? He doesn't have enough life experience to even apply this stuff. And I'm like, actually, I've grown up on the mat. At that point, I was already doing jiu-jitsu for like 7 years. So I know a little bit.
Yeah, I think we've talked to a lot of people that started very young and owned their own academies when they were 22. You know, and age is just a number, right? I tell myself that all the time because I'm getting up there in years. But you know, I think part of it too is you have to, you know, going back to chasing belts or stripes and stuff, you have to stop comparing yourself to other people. It was hard for me about a year ago to be like, man, here comes somebody else just passed me up, right? And why? And figure that out and just let it go, you know, and accept your own journey and your own time on the mat and figure out what works for you and what works best. And you're going to be so much happier, and you're going to find out that your journey is yours exclusively, when you stop
Yeah.
comparing yourself to other people. And I think that you're going to look back on your time at the mat or on the mat and be really, really happy.
For
Josh,
sure.
how do you think, what Gary just mentioned, how you not compare yourself to somebody else? One of the interesting things that I found in the past 20 years doing jiu-jitsu was that jiu-jitsu is one of those hobby discipline sports, however you want to slice it, that it's virtually impossible to measure. You swim, you time it. You run, you time it. Soccer, you score goals, you score passes. Hockey, same thing. Chess, even. It's all easy to measure. It's all easy to measure. Jiu-jitsu, how do you measure jiu-jitsu? Do you measure jiu-jitsu?
I do.
Yeah.
Every time I roll, if I get tapped out one less time, I'm doing better. Every time. So that's the way I look at it. That's how I measure it. I'm not getting my butt kicked so much, and that means I'm doing better.
Sure. So the way that I measure myself in jiu-jitsu is, like I said, I could care less about competing. I do it every now and then just to make sure that my skills are sharp and that like I'm not just making stuff up and that what I'm doing is actually applicable in like a high stress situation. But I was always very big on trying to become an encyclopedia. So if I could go ahead and say I want to focus on one position for a month, I'm going to try to learn as many possible things within that position in that month that I can do. And so when I switched over to the Jungle MMA, we actually had belt testing. It was the first time that I'd ever had belt testing in my jiu-jitsu career up until that point. And I noticed that when people were asked to do certain moves, they would freak out. But if I told them to free flow and just move by themselves, they would do things that showed black belt level mastery at blue belt just because it was something that was so applicable to either like their personality or their body type. And so I kind of gauge how good somebody is at jiu-jitsu based on how well they can manipulate their own body. So like if you have somebody that's maybe a little bit more round in the midsection, maybe he's going to be much better at like a half guard or a deep half guard kind of thing. I'm not going to expect that guy to sit there and try to do like fancy inverted barambolos or like kiss of the dragons or anything like that. I've always said, and I don't remember who said it first, I'm taking it from somebody else. It's not always about how good you are at jiu-jitsu, it's how good jiu-jitsu is for you. And so I would be 100% okay giving somebody a black belt that maybe they're only good in like 5 positions, but they've been doing it for so long and it has helped them improve their lives so much that yes, you are a black belt. You're a black belt in spirit. You're a black belt in this very kind of like niche of jiu-jitsu. Like maybe you have an absolutely stellar half guard and nobody in the gym can really pass your half guard, but you suck at every other position. That's cool. You're a black belt in that position. You just have to realize that you do have areas to still improve on and just constantly work.
Can you ever be best at everything?
No, absolutely not.
That's a strong statement.
No, you'll never be the best at everything. You will
Why
be
not?
the best at maybe 2 or 3 things. There's too much to focus on. You can have extremely sound fundamentals, and those fundamentals can carry you on, but you'll never be the best. There's always going to be somebody that is going to be better than you. And that is something that, as a young black belt, I am struggling with myself right now.
Why? Explain that.
So obviously, when you get a belt, it takes a couple of months to grow into that belt. But not only did I get a brand new black belt, but I also decided to uproot my life, move halfway across the country, and go to a brand new
Here we
school,
go again, right?
right? And roll with
No
people
target
that
on your back.
No.
No, not at all. And I'm. And
Oh,
I
you just got it, did you?
I just so happen to be the smallest black belt at the school that I'm training at right now. So everybody else is like a good 25 to 30 pounds heavier than I am. I'm like 145, 150 pounds soaking wet. So I kind of have this target on my back from like these 185-pound purple belts that are trying to kill me right now. And I realize that like, yeah, there's going to be times where like I can't really do much. Like I'm going to just go in defensive mode and I'm going to go into survival. And eventually I'm probably going to catch them, but I'm just going to hope that they get tired. And that's the way that I'm going to do it.
Yeah, and it's all about strategy, isn't it?
Oh, 100% it's about strategy. I'm not going to attack a 250-pound black belt the same way that I'm going to attack a 250-pound purple belt or even a 150-pound purple belt. I'm going to play a completely different game with a larger black belt. I'm going to hopefully try to get on top and stay on top. I do not want to. I've always been a guard player. And I have learned very recently that it is not always a good idea to stay on bottom with a bigger guy. Like my first probably week of training here, I came home with like just cross face marks all across my face. And I was just like, man, I got to like stop just accepting bottom position and just stay on top with some of these bigger guys. Like once they solidify their grips and they drop their hips, I'm like, yep, nope, I'm stuck here. I'm going to have to wait until they move to start to move around them.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people, at least I hear it as an instructor, they are too strong, they are too big, they know more, they're more knowledgeable. What do you say to all of students like that? I mean, is it possible? Is it truly possible today, in today's time, to be smaller, not as strong, and still use strategic jiu-jitsu to overcome these situations and get through these motions to seek the dominant position and ultimately, get to the end with submission?
So there's hope. It just has to be through strategy. It's not going to be through kind of anything else. You're going to have to, with bigger guys, you're going to have to play your A game, and you're just going to have to kind of use your attributes a little bit more. Like for me, I'm pretty quick. So on a bigger guy, I'm going to try to be as fast and as scrambly as possible. And I just know that I can't let them completely solidify a position, because once they do, I'm kind of screwed. I'm really going to have to overexert myself. There's a conversation that two of the Gracies had with each other. And the one Gracie, I do not remember their names for the life of me right now. But one of the Gracies was like, yeah, jiu-jitsu is made for everyone. It's made for the smaller person to beat the bigger person. And the other Gracie goes, good, give me all the big guys, because I will teach them jiu-jitsu. And now it's, to me, I've always seen it as, yes, as a smaller person, if I'm going up against somebody that's completely untrained or maybe a couple belt levels below me, I can fully survive and impose my will on a heavier person. But once that heavier person knows jiu-jitsu, attributes are definitely coming into play. There's no, Micah Mushemi is the exception, not the rule. When he jumped up and went up against Muhammad Ali, like that is not the norm. And most people that do jiu-jitsu, especially if you're a hobbyist, if you go up and you jump up from rooster weight to heavyweight or ultra heavyweight, whatever weight class Muhammad is, you're probably going to get squished. And it's body mechanics at that point.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting part behind all of this. There's so many dynamics behind, motion, physical aspects of our game and the journey itself. And then there's a mental aspect. Like, let's be honest, some of us process information faster than others. Some of us can skip several steps to be way ahead. The predictability of situation, analyzing situation, whole night. There's so many variables throughout this whole thing that it's not cookie cutter. Jiu-jitsu is not cookie cutter. There's so many dynamics, and taking advantage of as many as you can at any given time under the circumstances that you're in, that is what's giving you opportunity, not a win, opportunity. What you do with it, that's to be determined, right?
For sure.
So listen,
100%.
Yeah, so recent black belt, how did that go down? I mean, like, let's go back to that a little bit, because I'm really curious about this. I have many conversations throughout the times, with students, and everybody is always curious, what happens when you get that belt? Does anything change? It's like epiphany. Oh, you just gain all the knowledge in your head, and now you're like awesome because you got that belt, right? Right? Tell me that's what it is, because it has to be that way, right?
No, I feel like it's
is that what happened with you, Thomas?
The opposite of that.
Are you speaking from experience, Thomas?
No, I'm not. No, believe me, I can tell you my story. I still don't have epiphanies, but it is emotional moment. It is a very huge milestone in your life, personally, and then on the mat. Walk us through that day. What happened? How did it unfold? What was in your mind, considering your entire journey up to this point, especially with your mom and all these things that unfolded in your childhood?
So my wife and I had decided that once I graduated law school, we were going to move out of Orlando and we were going to move out of Florida. my wife is very, very big on family. And so that's how we ended up in New York right now. But we had kind of made the decision to move by the end of the year of this year. And then COVID threw a wrench in that. And so we had to move earlier than we expected. But when we had made that decision, I went up to my instructors. I was already teaching as a brown belt. I was teaching probably 2 to 3 classes a week. And then I had a list of people that I was teaching privates to. And I had gone up to my instructors and I was like, I'm getting ready to move. I was like, you guys know my whole story and everything. What do I have to do to be able to get myself to that next level? And it turns out that before I even approached them asking what I had to do to get myself to that next level, I was already up in the talks for getting my black belt. So I didn't get kind of stuck in that really awkward conversation because they were already very open to it. I do think that is a conversation that people need to be willing to have with their instructor sometimes, but they need to be willing to do it in a way that they're describing it as growth and not I've earned this, give it to me now. When I went up to my instructor and I asked about it, I was very on the line of what do I have to do to earn this, to get this within a given time frame. And Thiago Domingues told me, you're already doing everything that I want you to do to get a black belt. He was like, I'd like it if you competed more in IBJJF tournaments, but like, that's you don't like doing that. And I was like, yeah, that's not my cup of tea anyways. But he was like, I want you to continue teaching. I want you to focus on teaching. I want you to focus on helping others improve. And then from there, we'll readdress the situation when the time comes up to move. So once COVID happened, my wife lost her job. She worked in the hospitality industry as a graphic designer for an events company. All the law firms I had known pretty much either declared bankruptcy or only their managing partners were working. So I was having a really hard time trying to find a job. And I approached my instructors and I was like, hey, this move is happening way sooner than I want. And they're like, okay, we'll play it by ear and we'll see what goes on. And I think between the time that I had told them that I was going to move by June, I had probably started teaching at least 3 times a week, gi, no gi, and more of like an advanced class on top of like doing my own training. And then I was doing at least 3 private lessons a week. So they were kind of already under the idea that I'm performing as a black belt. I am already teaching at a black belt level, according to them. I still don't think that I'm teaching at a black belt level, but I'm a little bit harder on myself because I kind of pride myself in being kind of like that encyclopedia nerd jiu-jitsu guy. So I always can find ways to improve on my teaching. But the day that I got my black belt, I had known that it was coming up. I just didn't know when it was coming up. And so every day walking into the gym, I had butterflies. Like I've obviously worked at the gym, so I can see when inventory comes in and there's like a shiny new black belt sitting on the top shelf. And I'm like, ooh, that might be mine. And at the same time, I'm sitting there and I'm like having mini heart attacks. Like, I don't deserve this yet. I'm not ready for this. I have so much more that I can still improve on. I don't know if I want this yet. Up until that point, I had spent 2 to 3+ years of every belt so far. And I was a brown belt for about 19 to 20 months. And I was very terrified of getting that the black belt around my waist and it being too heavy, me not being able to live up to those expectations.
But isn't that what you wanted your entire time? I mean, you said you wrote it down. I want to be a black belt. This is it. It's right here. It's right in front of you. You can almost touch it.
It is. But then after training with so many black belts that are just absolutely amazing humans and then amazing on the mat, I was like, can I hold up to that standard? Like it's sitting there. It's very healthy to sit there and question your own abilities. And that's what I was doing. I was sitting there and I was trying to evaluate myself and trying to mentally prepare myself to jump into this next role. At the same time, now that I have my black belt, it is probably the heaviest thing that I've worn around my waist in my entire life. Like people will come up and a lot of lower belts kind of just expect you to have the answers magically to things. And they're very shocked when I'm like, okay, let's actually get down the position and start working from here so I can think my way through it. because I'm not going to be able to just like, yep, your hand needs to go there. You need to use this leverage point here. You need to scoot your hips to the side this way. Like, I can't just do that. We have to actually get in the position. We have to sit there and be a little bit cerebral and think about it to move on from there. Going back to the day that I was actually promoted, my head instructor, Mike Lee, by the way, a big shout out to the Jungle MMA. They have Felicia Spencer fighting out of there. Absolute monster. She's first degree black belt in Jiu Jitsu. She's awesome. But Mike Lee and Thiago both showed up to class, which is very rare that both of them are actually there for an extended period of time with each other. So I was like, okay, today's probably going to be the day. And then Mike starts going into this speech about how, I've been training since I was 15. I've been doing this for pretty much all of my meaningful part of my life. And then he starts going off about how I've probably competed more than all of the other black belts that were up there that had recently gotten promoted combined together, which I don't think is true at all, but he thought it was, so I'll run with it. I'm not a very good competitor to begin with. I just want to put that out there. Like, I think I have 2 gold medals to my name, and that's about it. But I'm always kind of willing and down to scrap out a little bit, especially once there's nobody in my weight class in Florida or at my belt level, and everybody trains no-gi. So a lot of what I ended up doing was super fights. So I didn't really get medals for that. But Mike was like, this person talking about me, he's fully dedicated to this sport. And no matter what happens in his life, he shows up with a damn smile on his face and asks what he can do to help the other people in the room before he asks how he can help himself within the room. I've always been a big fan of being able to build up the lower belts around me, because even if you look at it from a purely hedonistic perspective, if I can get those lower belts better, it's going to make me work harder in the long run, and it's going to pay dividends for me later on. So that was kind of like,
I want you to get back to the story for sure, but it sounds a lot to me like you've come full circle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You started today talking about your mentors, and I'm sure that they were doing the exact same thing that you're doing now for everybody else. And here you are, pretty much knowing that today's going to be the day, right, that you're going to get that black belt, and it's all going to come full circle and come to fruition for you. Did they make you wait till the end of the class, or was this in the beginning?
No, it was right at the beginning of class. It was right when we were all lining up. Unfortunately, a couple of the other guys were also leaving the school. One of them, he's one of the heavyweight MMA fighters that they have. He's a blue belt. He's in the military, so he's actually getting stationed up by you guys in Great Lakes. I think in another month. So I actually dropped ROL Academy. Told them to go check it out.
Yeah, we'll come by.
Hey. But
hold on a minute. You send a heavyweight down my way. What?
Yeah.
Totally.
I like it. I like it.
We were friends. What's going on? Anyway, all right, so get back to your story.
So he starts talking about how we have these people that are leaving, and then obviously Mike Lee has, for the lack of the better purpose, for the past 3 years has been my go-to father figure for everything in life. Whether it be talking to him about the relationship that I was building with my wife, whether it be talking about business plans for the future, just anything that I had questions about in life, Mike was the go-to person that would just help me out and give me that fatherly, loving advice that I would need. But at the same time, he's extremely hard on you, because that's what you kind of expect from a dad a little bit. And so Mike starts breaking down, crying a little bit, and so then I start crying a little bit, getting all choked up on the inside, and I'm trying so hard to maintain this stoic face, just so I can be yeah, I don't want to break down and cry, because what if they ask me to give a speech and then I have to sit there and fumble through my words, I'm sobbing and it's not running down my face. But I just wanted to remind everybody that I was there with that. Just as much as that belt was going around my waist, it was just as much every one of their accomplishments, because without them, I wouldn't have been able to achieve that.
That's deep, Josh. That's deep.
It's beautiful, actually. And it's great that, you have all these people, right? All these mentors, all these people like I said, I didn't grow up with a father either. And you search that out when you're a kid. And sometimes you find the right people and sometimes you don't. And it sounds to me, well, it's obvious. It doesn't sound to me. It's obvious that you found the right people at that those teenage years to get you where you are today. And it's a credit to them, right? As much as anybody's jiu-jitsu journey is a credit to themselves and their own accomplishments, it shines a light on all those people that help them get there, right? All their instructors, their training partners, everybody.
Real quick, just because I want to give them a shout out, and they kind of have helped form my jiu-jitsu ideology from the get-go, is Adam and Andres Rezovic. They kind of really instilled the family aspect of jiu-jitsu with me very hard at a very young age, and provided me with the opportunities to train when I did not have the financial or mental well-being means to be able to show up and perform every day. They were kind of there and just took me under their wing, and they were like, we're going to make it happen for you. And so I want to give a big shout out to them, because without them, I definitely would not have gotten my black belt. I definitely would have quit at blue belt.
Yeah. I mean, two great guys. I had privilege training and following their leadership for years now, and it's that's a great role model to have in your life. So, yeah, good for you. Good for you.
If you ever want to see, Thomas has met some pretty impressive people over the years, but if you want to see him fanboy out, watch when Adam walks into the room. And it's hilarious. We were at a fight to win one night, and I think we were the last couple guys hanging out, and Adam comes approaching us, and like Thomas just being himself the whole night. He wasn't on a downer. He was his normal jovial self. But boy, as soon as he saw Adam, man, it was like, boom, he just exploded. And it was, come here, let's take pictures. Handed me his camera.
We are not here to talk about Adam.
Okay? No, this is,
but I'll tell you, Adam is one of those guys who always has a great day. He has always smile on his face. And then he'll roll with you. He'll beat you up. And almost when you are about to tap, he'll let it go. And he'll do this like 25 times. There's nothing more annoying about this. There's nothing more annoying. So when you think you have a bad day on the mat, roll with Adam. Then you'll know what it really means.
Yeah.
Am I wrong, Josh? You know what I'm talking about.
No, you're 100% right. 100% right.
I'm lucky. I've only been Izuki at seminars, so I've never had the full experience of just getting destroyed over and over again, or almost destroyed, and then having it happen over and over and over again.
So, Josh,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was about to ask you, so the $1 million question right now is, did you achieve your goal, or the journey has just begun?
The journey's just begun, man. Like the black belt was like the beginning of the stages of my goal. So like once I got my black belt, I was like, oh, I have a lot of refining to do to be able to say that I actually know jiu-jitsu. Like when I got my purple belt, one of my friends, I think that was a brown belt, about to get his black belt at the time, had told me, once you get your purple belt, you could quit jiu-jitsu and nobody would ever be able to tell you that you don't know jiu-jitsu. And now that I have my black belt, that is 100% wrong. Now that I have my black belt, I feel like I could maybe quit jiu-jitsu and then say it's like riding a bike and I'd be able to find my way back into it. But now I just want to focus on refining everything. Like I've gone back from playing all of my fancy guards to playing like a collar sleeve close guard. And I'm like, I'm going to refine the hell out of it. I'm going to find every single little nuance that I can from this position. And I'm going to start my mastering process over and over and over again. And who knows, maybe it'll change the way that I play jiu-jitsu as a whole from here on out for the rest of my journey. I don't know.
And funny you mentioned this, because I had a similar conversation with somebody asked me, is like, what is the difference between up to the point when you get a black belt and then past the point you get a black belt? And I was trying to explain, and it's very difficult to explain that feeling, but I kind of came to the point where, from white up to the black, you're learning jiu-jitsu. But once you get that black, you start questioning everything that you've learned, and you're trying to redefine it one more time.
Yes.
Nice. Like it seems like a jazz analogy, right? These jazz musicians. I used to play a little bit, and one thing they always talk about is you have to master everything, right? And then you have to forget it all. and kind of start over, right? So jiu-jitsu is your instrument, and you've mastered everything. You know all the scales, but now how do you change that all up and to make it your own and make yourself even more special within it?
100%. 100%.
Beautiful story, Josh. Before we wrap all this up, I mean, there's a lot of people out there. One, unfortunately, you know, we're going through this COVID situation, and there's a lot of people who will quit. There's a lot of people who will quit, unfortunately, for circumstances it might be even out of their control. And even if we weren't in this unique situation in the world, there's still a lot of people who will quit jiu-jitsu, unfortunately. What do you tell them? What's your motivator factor for your students? How do you keep them coming back? How do you explain to a student not to give up?
I tell them that jiu-jitsu is nothing but peaks and valleys. And there's going to be times where you are stuck in a valley for months on end, but you need to be able to embrace the suck, for a lack of a better term. And like, it's going to get better over time, like anything else. Like, if you just spend time sucking, you're eventually going to suck less. And it's kind of just like the way that I tell them, like, it's going to happen. I always tell them when people feel like quitting, because they're getting tapped out by maybe lower belts or something like that. I always tell them, you know, when I was a white belt to a blue belt, I used to go home every single night and tally in a notebook how many times I got tapped out with a bow and arrow choke. I think I lost count in a composition notebook at about 900 and something.
Ooh.
But now my go-to submission is the bow and arrow choke. And I have refined my bow and arrow choke to have like 5 different variations, and I will hit it from every position that I possibly can without even being on your back. It's my go-to. So like, you have to embrace it. And there's a lesson to learn from all of it. I was like, you know, 1% better every day, a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent every day is better. Showing up alone already gets you better. It builds like the mental dexterity and the mental toughness that you need. And I feel that people that kind of quit on jiu-jitsu, we're always taught to keep our egos in check constantly in jiu-jitsu. And I feel like the people that quit don't ever learn that aspect of checking their ego. And they are constantly comparing themselves to others. And eventually you just grow this maturity on the mat where that goes away, but you just have to be on the mat long enough for that to eventually dissipate by itself.
How do you not compare yourself to another? I mean, you're rolling with people. You're very likely rolling with the same people.
Yeah, you just got to get over it. You just got to, you know, you just have to let it go, because it's going to hold you down. Talking about quitting, I there's been a couple times where I was like, man, I'm not getting any better. I'm done. I'm texting my wife, I'm not going. I'm done. And she's like, absolutely not. Shut up. Get in the car, come home from work, get your gi, go.
Shout out to your wife. She's smart.
Yeah. I was going to say, how smart could she be? We've been together for 15 years. But I'm not going to say that. She know, man, if I quit, I'm not just letting myself down at this point, right? I'm letting her down, because she knows how much I love it. And I think if I quit, I'm quitting on her. I'm quitting on my kids. Because it takes up such a big part of your life that you're not just like, I mean, for some people maybe, but you're not just giving up a hobby. Once you invest to a certain point, you're not just giving up a hobby anymore. You're giving up a huge part of your life, and probably 99% of the time, it's something that made your life a lot better, right? And all the steps I've made in my personal life to get here where I am today in my personal life, if I quit jiu-jitsu, I would be quitting on all that too.
Josh, what's next for you? Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
He was about to pay me a compliment.
When we are comparing ourselves to others in regards to jiu-jitsu, I think people really need to sit back and reframe that. I'm not going to be mad at you because you've tapped me out. What I'm going to do, and what I think most people should do, is that they should use it as a time of reflection and ask that person that they're comparing themselves to, if you being the person that is comparing themselves. If you realize that you have a hole in your game that keeps on getting exploited by that person, and that person keeps beating you up from that position, I think that you need to stuff up your pride and sit there and talk to that person, have an actual conversation, and ask them to explain their methodology of how they're beating you at that position or how they're beating you as a whole. With right before I came here, Florida we were still able to completely train. We were in that phase where we were allowed to. Now it's probably going back to where it was before that. But I was getting wrecked by one of the black belts, and instead of beating myself up and kind of saying that I'm not good enough to be rolling with him, I just sucked it up and I was like, hey, why and how are you beating me from this position? What am I doing wrong? And you need to turn that negativity and that negative energy into growth energy. And from there, you'll find that you'll end up learning so much more. Just don't put yourself in that box.
Well, but it goes even deeper than this, right? I mean, if you don't fall off the bike, you will never learn balance. If you don't hold your breath, you will never learn how to swim. So putting yourself in these compromised positions, right, and testing the waters, because that's what jiu-jitsu is a fine balance of troubleshooting and testing waters, right? If you don't find yourself in these positions, and if you don't ever tap, how will you know how to escape from them? I mean, let's be real for a second. If I never find myself in a choke, how will I know how to escape from the choke? I might know the step in theory, but the feeling, the adrenaline rush, the emotion, the process of thinking during that time will never exist. So you do have to put yourself in those positions, whether intentionally or not intentionally. Often our partners help us with this, right?
Yeah.
By doing the choking, right? But that's
Totally.
the learning process. That's why we do this, right? We just mentioned we were talking with Gary with somebody else on another episode, and it's like jiu-jitsu is the only hobby that I know where people come in with a big smile on their face, they get beat up, they leave with a smile on their face, they come back for more, and they still paying for it.
It's true.
Josh,
Top dollar too on top of it.
No kidding, right? I mean, Josh, what's next for you? What's near future looking like for Josh?
So my near future, what I'm looking at, as soon as competition opens up again, I want to go out and test my black belt. I want to see where kind of like my areas of refinement are. After that, my main goal is to find a job. Obviously, I'm fresh out of law school. I'm eager and willing to learn some new skills, and I want to take that next step in my professional career. But as a martial artist, my next move is I want to get my black belt in judo.
Nice. I know somebody who's
who's
trying for the same thing.
I'm on the same path right there. Judo is my thing these days. So yeah.
I'm a big fan of judo. I have a green belt. I really enjoy it. I hate wrestling. I'm absolutely terrible at it. And I find judo to just be like so beautiful, kind of. And obviously it's related to jiu-jitsu, so it helps a lot already having a copious amount of experience within jiu-jitsu, jumping into judo. But I think that is definitely the next kind of goal that I'm going to be chasing. I know right now everybody looks at me really weird because instead of wanting to drill like guard passing or anything like that, I'm like, hey, can I throw you a couple of times? And everybody's like, I don't know, maybe.
I'm noticing the same too. People were very eager to stand up with me, and then now for some reason nobody wants to stand up with me. That I'm.
I'll go. I'm game.
Gary loves to get tossed around.
I've been focusing on Tominagas because everybody's afraid of being thrown. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna guard pool. Have fun.
Oh,
nice.
That's it.
Thomas is an Uchimata master.
I love it, Nogi.
Oh yeah, nice.
Oh, yeah.
No, I've been hit from Thomas a lot. And we haven't. I mean, geez, I can only imagine if we've been training these past few months, how many more times I've been tossed with it. It's fun though. I love judo, man. I love it. I think it's great.
Josh, how and where people can find you?
So I don't have a Facebook account, but I do have an Instagram account. You guys can follow me on Instagram at JSHILZ. My old Xbox gamer tag from back in the day. I post some pretty fun stuff. When I'm training regularly, I have a lot of training footage. I have a lot of, whenever I teach, I do a lot of Pretty much everything that I teach, I'll end up throwing up on Instagram at some point. And I try to keep it interesting, and you can follow a little bit of my life as well. I have like the achievements that I hit outside of jiu-jitsu on there, and you can kind of see my relationship grow with me and my wife on there as well. I kind of use it as like a diary, so you guys are more than welcome to like see what it's like inside my head through my Instagram account. And yeah, you guys need to see who I am as a person off the mat as well.
Sounds
That's
great.
awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a beautiful story, Josh. Thank you for sharing with us. I mean, anything from your childhood all the way up to the current time. Congratulations on your black belt. That's a huge, huge achievement.
Thank you.
I love the stories. I love the details that you share with us. I'm sure there will be a lot of people appreciating this and really, taking a step back and maybe reflecting on their own life and, following your footsteps. Who knows? Who knows?
Sure.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing everything, like you said, and good luck with everything. You got a lot in your future. So I really wish you the best.
I want to thank you guys for this opportunity. This was really fun, and let's do it again someday. This is cool.
Absolutely. And when you make your way down to Chicago, we need to put a seminar at ROL Academy. You're always welcome. You stop by several times, and I'm looking forward to getting beat up with you.
Yeah, I missed out the last open mat he was here. I had to take off. So hopefully we'll see you as soon as possible.
All right,
yeah,
Josh.
I'll see you guys probably around Christmas time.
I hope so.
Good.
Peace, Josh. Thank you so much.
Josh, take care.
Have a nice one. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to ROL Radio. Check out all future episodes on our website and all major podcast platforms. Take care.